Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to start with the 2016 media briefing on the approval of national examinations results. And without waste of time, I just want to indicate two things before we start. First of all, that the actual copy of the media statement will be made available immediately after the briefing. That's point number one. Point number two, that please, after the media briefing, if you still need to do one-on-one interviews with any of the panelists, could you please just indicate to me, and then we will schedule it accordingly. In the meantime, could we please also put our cell phones on silent? Thank you very much. Now I will give over to Dr. Mafura Kometsi, the CEO of Umalusi, to start with the briefing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Danyani. It gives me pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome the chairperson of Umalusi Council, Professor John Volmink. Professor Volmink is acting Vice Chancellor, Cape Peninsula University of Technology. Also welcome Dr. Ruth Mampani, chairperson of the Assessment Standards Committee and member of Umalusi Executive Committee of Council, sitting on my extreme right. Dr. Mampani is senior lecturer at the University of Pretoria. I welcome the management of Umalusi. I've seen in the audience Mr. Emmanuel Sibanda, executive manager, and Ms. Zodwa Mudimakwani, also executive manager. Representatives of different assessment bodies. I observe that you've got Mr. Brian Schroeder from the Western Cape Department of Education, Anne Oberolza from the Independent Examinations Board, Dr. Babette Leroux from SACAI, South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. I don't think I'm missing anybody. They are not here. Okay, I'm only acknowledging the colleagues that are here. Also, welcome the editors and reporters, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, Umalusi is pleased to hold this annual media briefing after the 2016 national examination. The results of the following assessment bodies were subjected to Umalusi's standardization processes. The Independent Examinations Board, IEB, for the following qualifications, NSC and GETC ABET. South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, SACAI, for the NSC. Benchmark Assessment Agency, BAA, GETC ABET. Department of Basic Education, DBE, for the National Senior Certificate, NSC. Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET, for the GTC, ABET, and NATED programs N2 to N3, and National Certificate Vocational. On behalf of Umalusi, I'm delighted to report that we have successfully delivered on our mandate, which Chairperson Professor Volmink will elaborate on shortly. As a Council for Quality Assurance in General and Further Education and Training, Umalusi has the national duty to ensure that high-quality educational standards are maintained across all assessment bodies, both private and public. In line with this view, Umalusi Council is always careful to approach the work of all assessment bodies with the same rigor and urgency. Our aim as Umalusi is to make sure that we create an environment that will enable us to continually deliver on our standard setting and quality assurance mandate. To this end, Section 27 of the National Qualifications Act number 67 of 2008 outlines the function of the Quality Council. Of particular significance to this is Section 27H, which indicates that the Quality Council, Umalusi, must develop and implement policy and criteria for assessment for the qualifications on its sub-framework. The Genfectwa Act number 58 of 2001, which is Umalusi's founding act, mandates the council to assure the quality of assessments at exit points, approve the publication of results, and issue certificates to successful candidates. Thus, a key function of the council in this process is the approval of results. Today's media briefing is also a pinnacle of the hard work done by Umalusi staff and members of council in ensuring that Umalusi does in fact deliver on its mandate as a council for quality assurance in general and further education and training. Important stakeholders, of course, are the learners and their parents, who are eager to know whether Umalusi has carried out the necessary processes that ensure the credibility of their exit level qualifications. I sincerely thank all Umalusi appointed moderators and monitors, members of the Assessment Standards Committee, as well as Umalusi staff for putting immense effort in assuring the quality of assessments and examinations. The various units at Umalusi have contributed significantly to the outcomes of these examinations. Staff in these units have displayed commitment, patience, and dedication under stressful conditions and challenges for an extended period of time. Their unremitting hard work has indeed paid dividends. The same goes for the officials of the different assessment bodies. Running laborious examination processes is no mean feat. The class of 2016 for the Department of Basic Education is the third grade 12 cohort to write final examinations under the Curriculum Assessment Policy Statement, otherwise known as CAPS. Similar to the 2015 cohort, the class of 2016 also includes a significant number of progress learners. In comparison to 65,673 progress learners in 2015, the class of 2016 includes 109,400 progress learners. This is a substantial increase of 43,727 progress learners from last year. Consequently, the number of candidates in 2016 also grew in tandem with the new reality of progress learners. This year, the Department of Basic Education has registered approximately 668,612 full-time and 146,997 part-time candidates, with a total of approximately 815,609 candidates for the 2016 NSC examinations. In total, the number of progress learners constitutes 13.4% of the total enrollment of 815,609 candidates for 2016. We want to assure the South African public that Umalusi Council is constantly working with the Department of Basic Education to find sustainable ways to support progress learners. Learners from Vuwani in Limpopo have been the unfortunate victims of protest action. The Department of Basic Education, in collaboration with the Limpopo Department of Education and a number of NGOs, introduced several interventions, including student camps and additional study material. We commend the department for these interventions. The position of Umalusi on the results of one is that students who wrote the 2016 examinations have to be treated the same way as all other candidates. The quality assurance processes cannot be relaxed for them because of the school disruptions we have witnessed in the area. Umalusi has been in discussions with the senior officials of the Department of Higher Education and Training about the failures of the examination systems. The following have been raised with the colleagues in the department: perennial leakage of question papers, slow rate of capturing of learners' marks, the outdated and underspecified syllabi of NATED programs, mismanagement of assessment and examination processes at private TVET colleges. Umalusi has given the Department of Higher Education and Training clear directives to deal with these anomalies. The Department of Higher Education and Training, on the other hand, is commended for the introduction of compulsory 80% attendance requirement for their students before they can come into the examinations, and 40% requirement for internal continuous assessment. These two conditions have been put for the students, that you have to have compulsory 80% attendance and 40% in internal continuous assessment, ICAS, before you could be admitted to the examinations. The department is commended for that. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly outline what the standardization process entails. Any large-scale examination process invariably has many and varied sources of variability. Most of these are unplanned, unintended, and undesirable. They vary from mistakes in a question paper to subtle issues of level of difficulty of a question paper and a possible multiple and valid interpretations of questions. Standardization of learner performance is an important quality assurance process used the world over to mitigate the impact of learner performance caused by factors other than the learner's subject knowledge, abilities, and aptitude. There are two main objectives of standardization. First, to ensure that a cohort of learners is not advantaged or disadvantaged by factors other than their knowledge of the subject, abilities, and their aptitude. Second, to achieve comparability and consistency of learner performance across the years and across the various subjects within the given year. In short, ladies and gentlemen, standardization seeks to mitigate fluctuations in learner performance that are as a result of factors within the examination processes themselves, rather than the knowledge, aptitude, or abilities of learners, while simultaneously retaining real gains made as a result of improved teaching and learning and systemic interventions. Umalusi's standardization is carried out by the Assessment Standards Committee of Council. This is a committee of council which comprises of men and women of impeccable credentials, personal integrity, and credibility. They are experts in statistics, mathematics, education in general, and large-scale assessments. The standardization decisions are also informed by qualitative reports, which include marking and moderation reports. The subjects are standardized individually and in a non-iterative manner. There are 8 principles that guide the standardization process. I'll mention only 2 of these as they are particularly important. Our first preference is to accept raw marks as a fair reflection of learner performance. In general, no adjustment should exceed 10% of the total mark of the paper or the historical average. It should be obvious from the above 2 principles that one cannot have a fixed level of adjustment. An appropriate scaling operation must be employed in order to be consistent with these principles of standardization. In instances where raw examination marks are accepted, it is because, 1, the examination has been adjudged to have been of appropriate level. Second, the learner performance is in line with the average historical learner performance profile in the subject. Third, the conduct and management of examinations in the subject was not compromised. Council needs to satisfy itself that all assessment bodies have been subjected to the following quality assurance measures before it can approve the publication of results: moderation and approval of question papers, verification of the moderation of internal assessments, monitoring of the conduct of examinations, monitoring of the marking process, verification of marking, standardization of results. Umalusi, ladies and gentlemen, conducted monitoring of marker selection and related processes with a view to improve the practices followed by the various provincial departments of education. Also, Umalusi conducted an audit of appointed markers in the 9 provincial departments of education. Furthermore, Umalusi observed the following processes in the provinces visited: the process of marker selection, the training of various levels of markers. Lastly, Umalusi is satisfied that in general, provincial departments of education have enhanced their criteria for the appointment of markers as stated in Education Labor Relations Council, ELRC Resolution number 6 of 1997 as amended in 2001. Also, there was notable improvement in the manner in which the memorandum discussion meetings were conducted. This year, the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, SACAI, which is an independent assessment body provisionally accredited by Umalusi to administer the National Senior Certificate Examinations, administered its NSC examinations for the 3rd time this year. Another new assessment body, Benchmark Assessment Agency, BAA, which is also in the process of obtaining accreditation from Umalusi, ran a pilot of its 2nd GETC examinations in November. Benchmark's results were also subjected to Umalusi standardization processes. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening to me. Please join me in welcoming Umalusi Chairperson of Council, Professor John Volmink, to deliberate on the findings of Umalusi and its conclusions regarding the examinations run by the following bodies: the Independent Examinations Board, South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, Benchmark Assessment Agency, Department of Basic Education, and the Department of Higher Education and Training in 2016. I hand over to Professor John Volmink to address you.
Thank you, Dr. Akumeti. Members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say that as Umalusi, we owe it to our allegiance is to the Constitution of the country, to the people of the country, and to, most importantly, to the learners who were candidates for the various examinations. To that end, I want to say up front, there are no secrets. Whatever we did to any subject with any qualification is open for scrutiny. So on request, you can ask the details, and they will be given to you. As Dr. Akumeti said, our responsibility is to assure the quality of assessments at exit points. So, for example, we won't do grade 11 or grade 7, but we will do grade 12. And we need to issue certificates to the successful candidates. So I trust that this will be an open discussion. I will say a few things about each qualification, about what we did, and you would then have an opportunity to interrogate that. So over the past few days, commencing on the 16th of December, the Assessment Standards Committee of Umalusi, and as Dr. Akumeti said, it's a body of professionals in hard at work. They're not here today, but it's a big group from different universities and other walks of life. And they've been reviewing and moderating learner performance in several qualifications as outlined by the CEO. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to deal with the approval of decisions per qualification, starting with the National Senior Certificate. And the National Senior Certificate is offered by 3 assessment bodies. It's the Department of Basic Education, the IEB, and Sakai, as pointed out by Dr. Akumeti. I just want to say, it may appear to you that I'm spending more time on the DBE, because unlike the IEB and Sakai, the DBE is both an assessment body as well as a provider. So IEB doesn't provide, it's an assessment body. The same with Sakai. So the DBE has a dual responsibility, and that's why we go into more depth as far as the DBE is concerned. Dr. Akumeti already pointed out that for the DBE, there were 668,612 full-time candidates and 146,997 part-time candidates. For the NSC, offered by the Department of Basic Education in 2016. So a total of 58 subjects were presented for standardization, and the standardization committee, chaired by Dr. Mampani on my far right, and her team, had deliberated on that. And Dr. Rakometsi had pointed out that we prefer raw marks. In other words, we prefer to leave it unless there's a reason to change it. So after moderation of the 58 subjects, raw marks were accepted for 26 of these subjects. And that represents just under 45% of the subjects. I can mention to you the subjects that were left unchanged. There were 26, as I said. Firstly, physical science. Physical science was not adjusted in any way, so it's a raw mark. History. English home language. Life orientation. Consumer studies. Agricultural technology, music, dance studies, visual arts, civil technology, mechanical technology, Afrikaans, first additional language. isiNdebele, first additional language. isiZulu, first additional language. Setswana, first additional language. Seswati, first additional language. Tsonga, first additional language. Shivenda, first additional language. Sesotho, first additional language. Afrikaans, second additional language. English, second additional language. isiNdebele, second additional language. isiZulu, second additional language. Setswana, second additional language. isiXhosa, second additional language. And Sepedi, second additional language. Those subjects were left untouched. So they were raw. And in other words, the candidates will get whatever they scored on the test. Now, moderation with mainly upward shifts. When we say mainly upward shifts, it's a complicated process. So sometimes we shift a part of the graph up or down and the other part in a different direction. So when we say moderation with mainly upward shifts, we mean towards the average historical learner performance profile. Now, upward shifts was done for 28 subjects. And they were life sciences, mathematical literacy, mathematics, geography, hospitality studies, agricultural management practices, agricultural science, computer technology, electrical technology, engineering, graphics and design, dramatic arts, business studies, economics, design, religion studies, isiZulu home language, Afrikaans home language, isiNdebele home language, Seswati home language, Setswana home language, Sesotho home language, Shivenda home language, Tsonga home language, Sepedi home language, English first additional language, isiXhosa first additional language, Sepedi first additional language, Sesotho second additional language. So those were the 28 upward shifts. But there were some downward shifts as well. And downward shifts towards the average historical learner performance profile was effected on the remaining 4 subjects. And they were accounting, isiXhosa home language, tourism, and information technology. I just want to point out by comparison, in 2015, 59 subjects were presented for standardization. Raw marks were accepted for 29 of those subjects, which is 49%. And the remaining 30 subjects were all adjusted upwards last year. Now, it's perhaps appropriate for me just to take a minute or two to connect with the things that Dr. Rakometsi said. So first thing I want to say is this cohort of 2016, while the learner performance in 2015, that's last year, departed quite significantly from the average historical learner performance profile. The learner performance of the cohort of 2016 this year has moved closer to the average historical performance profile. In other words, is moved closer to the norm. So whatever adjustments we made were not radical. They were almost on the norm. And as I said before, you're welcome to gain access to those and see what we've done. So it's pleasing to see that the marks of subjects such as physical sciences and history were left as unadjusted. And that there was a marked improvement in subjects such as accounting. However, there are subjects such as geography. Geography showed a marked drop in learner performance. And other subjects such as life sciences, business studies, economics, and several home languages have not shown the progress that was hoped for. Now, I want to single out one subject, because there are many subjects where the learner performance fluctuates from year to year. But we have to single out mathematics as one of the key gateway subjects where, in this country, we have not been able to move the needle. We made almost no progress over the years. It's one subject where the performance is completely flat. And what also struck me is that it's a bit alarming that since 2014, and Dr. Rakometsi had pointed out, something happened in 2014. Remember, the National Senior Certificate was introduced in 2008. That's 9, so there are 9 cohorts of that. However, in 2014, a modification was done, which is called the CAPS curriculum. So there's only 3 years of CAPS. I'll come back to that point. But it is alarming that since 2014, mathematical literacy is no longer the soft option that it used to be. It has joined mathematics as a learning area where the learner performance is critically low. So mathematical literacy is as hard as mathematics. I want to also, I'm sure you would want me, as Dr. Rakometsi had started, talk about the progress learners and what impact they've had on this cohort, the results of this cohort. And as Dr. Rakometsi had pointed out, there were many more progress learners this year than in previous years. In 2014, not just 2015, 2014 we had progress learners. There were 30,000, more or less, which is about 5% of that cohort. Then last year, the class of 2015 had about 10% of the total cohort. And this year, the CEO has pointed out, there are 13.4% of the cohort, progress learners. And that's 109,400. Now, let me just again go over some of the things that Dr. Rakometsi said, because it's important to understand these results and how we make our decisions. The policy on progression was implemented in 2013. And the purpose of that was to prevent learners being retained in the same phase for more than 4 years. So there are 4 phases. And you can't stay in the phase, you can't fail more than once, basically. That's what it means. Each phase is 3 years. However, this policy was unevenly implemented across the provinces at the time, and during 2016, the progression policy, we're happy to see, has been strengthened and implemented in a clearer, less arbitrary manner. The DBE, for example, had introduced preconditions that progress learners had to satisfy before they were moved to the next grade. You can't just say, I failed, therefore I move. There are preconditions. The tracking and identification of progress learners have also become clearer. It was interesting for me to note, of the 58 subjects, in 6 subjects, there were no progress learners. 0. So an analysis was done on the impact of progress learners. And it was based on the raw scores of 2016. And it demonstrates that the performance of progress learners account for an increase in the failure rate per subject of not greater than 5%. In fact, in 33 of the 52 subjects, so 58 minus a 6, in 33 of the 52 subjects with progress learners, the negative impact of progress learners on the pass percentage is less than 1% per subject, in 33 of the 52. And there can be many reasons for that. And I'm sure you will have questions about that. And we can't pretend we know all the reasons. But let me purport that many of the progress learners opted to take the multiple examination option. You don't have to take all the subjects after they received their September examination results. So that's what do you call the trial exam. And because they took fewer subjects, it enhanced their chances of performing better in the subjects that they now wrote. So you didn't have to do the whole spectrum. Remember, what we're talking about here today is per subject. Neither I, nor Dr. Rakometsi, nor anybody here, anybody in this room, have any idea what the pass rate will be. No, none of us. So we can only tell you what the pass rate is per subject. And the rest is all conjecture and speculation. So Umalusi has taken note also, it's another point, of the evidence-based reports on the interventions and improvement strategies implemented by both the DBE, national, and the provincial education authorities for learners in general and for progress learners in particular, in order to reduce the negative impact on the 2016 NSC results brought about, the possible negative impact brought about by progress learners. The DBE and the provincial education departments provided us with evidence of interventions of targeted support for the progress learners. And they spent a long time with us and allowed us to interrogate that as Umalusi, to see where there's a causal link between those efforts and the results. And I think Dr. Raka mentioned this, and I want to just reiterate it. I also said it earlier. It's important to note that the class of 2016 is a 9th cohort of the NSC. It's only the 3rd cohort to write the CAPS aligned exam. And so, in other words, why I'm mentioning this so many times is that while the 2016 cohort has benefited from the maturity of the NSC system over the 9 years, the CAPS aligned system introduced in 2014 is still finding its place after only 3 years. Normally we work on a 5-year average. So in dealing with the results of the cohort of 2014, 2015, and 2016, that's post-CAPS, Umalusi faced a twofold challenge, and it was hard for us. And I don't want to pretend it's an easy task. On the one hand, there is a need to come to terms with the demand of a strengthened CAPS aligned curriculum. And on the other hand, there is a need to embrace a cohort with increasing numbers of progress learners. We've learned a lot of things in the process, and I'm confident that the lessons that we've learned in the process would put us in a better position as Umalusi to ensure that the class of 2016 would not be disadvantaged in any way. So Umalusi has put in place rigorous and robust procedures that provide assurance that all learners receive appropriate recognition for their performance in line with agreed national standards. And this is an important thing that we often say: no learner should feel that she or he was born in the wrong year. And I'll come back to that point under my next issue. Dr. Rakometsi has also pointed out the importance of the standardization process, which is the second thing. And I've been involved with Umalusi one way or the other for 10 years. And I can't pretend that I fully understand each and every aspect of the standardization process. And therefore, it's a little bit frustrating if somebody, after one session, either rejects it or becomes cynical about it. It's hard. These things are hard. You have to apply your mind to it. And it's very subtle. And I think, as pointed out, Dr. Rakometsi pointed out, we want to mitigate the sources of variability from year to year. And those sources that impact on the learner performance from one year to the other. And those can be the cognitive demands, the difficulty levels of questions, the marking, the curriculum changes, the interventions. A whole range of things. I can go on and on. There are many, many things that change from year to year. So unless you assume that those conditions are exactly the same this year as it was last year, you don't have to do anything. But you will have to remain open to the need for standardization, because it is employed as a quality assurance process all over the world, not only in South Africa. This is an international thing. It is not just done for NSC, it's done for all the qualifications. And it's not only done for one assessment body, it's done for all the assessment bodies equally, as Dr. Rakometsi has pointed out. So I just want to say this thing about standardization. It aims in the main to achieve equivalence of the standard of the exam across years, but it is also aimed to deliver a relatively constant product to the market, in other words, to the universities, to the colleges, to the employers. A crude way of saying it, as Umalusi, we have to make sure an A remains an A. So if one school has 10 A's this year, it will raise many eyebrows if that same school has 30 A's next year. Something clearly is wrong. And then we can expect that when standards of examinations are equivalent, certain statistical mark distributions should correspond. It is this principle of correspondence that forms the basis for comparing distributions with the historical averages that are developed over 5 years. And when we do that, we use things such as means, medians, pass-failure rates, distinction rates, I've just pointed out. We also look at something called the pairs analysis. If you look at the cognate group of subjects, how the performance in one subject compares with the other subjects in its group, in its cognate group. So even when we don't have historical data, which we don't fully have in the case of CAPS, we can use pairs analysis, and we can use many other means of adjusting the marks. And I lastly just want to say about this is that, you know, when I think it's an enduring criticism of Umalusi decision making, that it seems so highly statistical. And that we only look at the numbers, basically. But I can assure you, and I speak on behalf of the entire Umalusi team, that before adjustments are made, adjustments only happens at the culmination of a long process of receiving input, qualitative and quantitative input, and that involves a whole range of things. Assessment body or department coming to tell us what you've done during the year, what was the dosage, how many people attended, who were the people, and so on. And the standardization process starts with the setting of papers, and then the moderation of those papers, and then the writing of the exams and the marking of the exams and the verification of the marking. And only finally, in this case on the 23rd of December, we did adjustments of the mark distribution. So we don't just walk in and adjust marks using the numbers only. And I have to say that given the complex nature of the stages that I've just outlined, and the processes followed, it can lead to misinterpretations. So again, I would encourage you, if there are things that you don't understand, to raise those issues. You can't take one of those aspects in isolation of the other. You have to take them all together. It's important because it's a basis for Umalusi to declare exams as fair and valid and credible, and therefore to build public trust and confidence. Let me just go over two more things about the NSC. The one is irregularities, but before I come to irregularities, I want to commend the department. That the quality of marking is pleasingly improving year on year, and that when the marking happens, the tolerance range of 2 to 3% for markers continue to limit the wild fluctuations that we had in past years, where we had bigger, if you give one marker an exam paper to mark, a script to mark, the range was extremely large. Now, we specified it needs to be no more than 2 to 3% between the markers. And that is working, and working very well. And although there's still room for improvement, the enhancement in the quality of marking must render a more accurate estimation of learner performance. So let me deal with irregularities. You know, every year we have to talk about this, and it's something I wish we would reach a point where we don't have to talk about it. Umalusi conducts not only the process of standardization, which I've just described, and Dr. Rakumesi has described, for national exams, but it also, through rigorous procedures, assures the quality and integrity of the entire exam process. So before we can say today, we approve the release of the results, we have to be sure that the exam was not compromised in any way. So gaining the approval of Umalusi Council for the release of the results is determined by the examination's level of compliance with policies and directives and guidelines issued by both Umalusi and each of the assessment bodies. It applies to all the assessment bodies. In other words, we have to be sure that there were no systemic irregularities. And each of these assessment bodies that Dr. Rakumesi has mentioned has to present to Umalusi a report on any irregularities. And we set aside a day, we interrogate those reports very thoroughly. Now, about the DBE exam, it will be recalled that in 2014, the National Senior Certificate exam, the credibility of that exam was tarnished by widespread group copying. I think none of us will ever forget that. And last year, in 2015, the system had to deal with the unfortunate incidents of paper leakages in Limpopo, which ultimately spilled over to Gauteng and to Mpumalanga. And in the main last year, it was Life Sciences Papers 1 and Paper 2 that were affected by the leakage. Now, it is common knowledge by now that in 2016, the system once again had to deal with the unfortunate incident of a paper leakage in Limpopo, which again spilled over to Gauteng. There was an investigation team, a task team established by the minister to identify the source of the security breach and the extent of the spread of the access to the question paper. And that investigation confirmed that the leakage of mathematics paper 2 were restricted to 2 schools in Limpopo. And it doesn't affect more than 100 learners. Now, this investigation wasn't just done by the department. The Hawks were involved. SAPS, in fact, the Hawks are still involved. SAPS, private investigators have been used and still involved. Learners were interviewed, officials were interviewed. And in addition, investigative marking was done to determine the extent to which learners may have benefited. So Umalusi wants to thank the department for the swift and decisive action taken to limit the spread of the leakage. And as a result, it has been decided that there is no need for a rewrite of mathematics paper 2. However, the Limpopo Education Department's non-adherence to some of the security measures outlined in the norms and standards must be addressed immediately and certainly in the next examination cycle. As Umalusi, we are very concerned about this. And we take a view that strong action must be taken against those learners and officials who have made themselves guilty of these acts of dishonesty. So I just want to say that Umalusi will not approve the release of the results of all the implicated learners, although the investigation is continuing. Group copying. I mentioned this earlier, and I thought we would never mention that again. But it is with bitter disappointment that we note that the evidence from the DBE indicates that the phenomenon of group copying has not been completely eliminated. It's still wiggling its tail. This year has seen a limited number of incidents involving group copying in KwaZulu-Natal, in Gauteng, and Mpumalanga. The investigations are underway, and the results from all the implicated centers will remain blocked. On behalf of Umalusi, I want to again extend a serious warning to those who are involved in acts of dishonesty that drastic measures will be taken against them. Already there are people that are incarcerated this year because of that. And when the investigation is completed, more people may be incarcerated. So, let me just repeat the fact that we know the extent of these leakages and irregularities leads me to the final declaration for the DBE. And the others I will go over much quicker, because many of the things apply to the other assessment bodies as well. So I can say, on behalf of Umalusi, having studied all the evidence at hand, on the management and conduct of the National Senior Certificate exams administered by the Department of Basic Education. Umalusi is satisfied that apart from the leakage of the Mathematics Paper 2 question paper in 2 schools in Limpopo, and a limited number of incidents of group copying in KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, Gauteng, and Mpumalanga, Umalusi is satisfied that the examinations were fair and valid and credible, and that nothing has compromised the integrity or credibility of the examination as a whole. We commend the department for running a successful and credible examination process, and accordingly we hereby approve the release of the 2016 results of the National Senior Certificate exams administered by the Department of Basic Education. So let me quickly go through the others. So the other 2 assessment bodies, the National Senior Certificate administered by the IEB, a total of 11,028 full-time and 747 part-time candidates were enrolled for the National Senior Certificate set and administered by the IEB, in the Independent Examinations Board. 61 subjects were presented for standardization, and after moderation, raw marks were accepted for 49 out of the 61 subjects. That represents 80.3% of the subjects for IEB were taken as raw. Upward shifts was effected on 7 subjects, and downward shifts towards the average historical learner performance for 5 subjects. And we, again, there were, for the IEB, a few instances of technical irregularities that they reported, but we are happy as Umalusi that nothing has compromised the integrity and credibility of the November 2016 NSC exams, and there were no real big issues. We are satisfied that the examinations were fair and credible, and I'd like to commend the IEB for year-on-year running a successful and credible examinations process. And therefore, accordingly, we approve the release of the results for the NSC administered by the IEB. The National Senior Certificate administered by Sakai, there were 1,713 candidates that were enrolled for the NSC exam set by Sakai. A total of 28 subjects only were presented for standardization, and of these, raw marks were accepted for 16 out of the 28 subjects, which is 57%. And of the remaining subjects, upward shifts towards the norm was effected on 9 subjects, and three were adjusted mainly downwards. And as in the case of IEB, Umalusi is satisfied that the examinations were fair and valid and credible, although there were a few instances of technical irregularities as reported, but nothing has compromised the integrity of the exam as a whole. And therefore, Umalusi would like to commend Sakai for the manner in which they have run the exam, and we approve the release of the results of the NSC administered by Sakai. So that was the NSC, and then there's another qualification, the GETC, which is ABET qualification, level 4. Firstly, it's administered by the DHET. It's also administered by IEB, and it's administered by an assessment body known as Benchmark. For the DHET, the Department of Higher Education and Training, and and Umalusi regards this as an important qualification in a country such as ours, ABET level 4, or the GETC. There were 76,916 candidates enrolled for the GETC, that's ABET level 4, for the DHET. 26 learning areas were presented for standardization. And of the 26 learning areas, raw marks were accepted for only 6 learning areas. Moderation with some downward shifts towards the norm was affected on 8, and the moderation with upward shifts were affected on 12 subjects. Umalusi remained concerned with the overall poor performance of candidates in the GETC examination administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. And as we said, we believe that's a very important qualification. We've also taken note that there were a few policy and procedural deviations which we've discussed with the assessment body, and those affect the conduct and management and administration of the examination. There were also incidents of group copying, but as a whole, nothing has compromised the integrity or credibility of the November 2016 exam of the GETC ABET run by the department, and we would like to approve the release of the results of GETC examinations administered by the department. The other GETC is run by the IEB. A total of 466 candidates sat for the GETC administered under the auspices of the IEB. There were 8 learning areas that were presented for standardization, and following moderation, raw exam marks were accepted in 5, and the remaining 3 were adjusted downwards. In the case of the IEB, there were again a few instances of technical irregularities and acts of dishonesty also that were reported at 13 centers of the IEB. But as a whole, nothing has compromised the integrity and credibility of the November 16 exam, and so we are happy to approve the release of the results of the GETC administered by the IEB. Then lastly, there's the GETC exam administered by Benchmark, where we had 284 candidates that were enrolled for the GETC exam and set and administered by Benchmark, and they only had 2 learning areas. They're provisionally accredited. And after moderation, we accepted raw marks for both these learning areas. Now, again, in the case of Benchmark, there were policy and procedural deviations that we've noted in the conduct of the examination, and irregularities that were confined to 2 centers. We've got their names. So as a whole, though, we are satisfied that the examinations were fair and valid and credible for Benchmark, and we accordingly hereby approve the release of the results of GETC administered by Benchmark. And finally, we go back to the DETs, and we start with the National Certificate Vocational, NCV, levels 2 to 4. These are done at the TVET colleges. In total, 184,086 candidates were enrolled for the 2016 NCV levels 2, 3, and 4. A total of 256 subjects were subjected to the standardization process, and Umalusi accepted raw marks for 102 of those 256 subjects, which makes it 39.8%, and downward shifts towards the norm were affected on 81 subjects, and upward shifts on 34. In 39 subjects, no decisions was taken due to low capture rate. Dr. Rakometsi has spoken about that. The Department of Higher Education, for all its qualifications, has a problem with capture rates. We, therefore, provisionally will standardize those, but we can't make a final decision unless 95% of those results have been captured. Nevertheless, we've taken note of incidents of group copying. There were also challenges experienced during the printing and distribution of question papers for the NCV. There were non-submission of ICAS evidence at some centres, but they were limited, and so there were no systemic irregularities that might have compromised the credibility of the NCV levels 2, 3, and 4. And so Umalusi is happy to release the results of the November 2016 NCV levels 2, 3, and 4 administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. The final qualification is what we call NATED, that's N2 and N3, where we had a total of 90,444 candidates that sat for the N2 and N3 examinations in 2016. And there were 59 subjects that were presented for standardization. Raw marks were accepted for 20 of those subjects. 14 were adjusted mainly upwards, and 14 subjects were adjusted mainly downwards. 10 subjects were not standardized for reasons that I've explained earlier. Part of the NATED is something called business languages as part of the NSC for colleges. And there were 4 instructional offerings presented, and we accepted raw marks in all 4 cases. And so the final declaration that Umalusi wished to make is the following, and it's important that although we approve the release of the results of NATED levels N2, N3 exams, the DHET is required to block the results of the 2 leaked question papers, the centres, as well as the results on the candidates and centres implicated in irregularities. And that is Kumanani Business College and City View College. Those 2, the results will be blocked for those 2. Ladies and gentlemen, in concluding, I want to say that brings us to the end of the release of the results. I want to just say that we will continue as Umalusi to strive for a system that maintains high quality standards in the interest of South African learners. And the Council is fully aware that some of our learners have to overcome some overwhelming difficulties in order to achieve a qualification, particularly the grade 12 exam. And so we spare no effort in ensuring that we strengthen our education from the bottom up and continue to strive for excellence in teaching and learning, because we just simply cannot depend on the standardization process to bring about improvement in the classroom. On behalf of the Council, I wish to extend our hearty congratulations to all the learners who have done well in the examinations this year. Congratulations also to their teachers, their parents, their guardians, and all those who have supported these learners in their studies. And to those who have not succeeded, there is another chance for you next year. So work hard and do well next year. We wish you all the best for 2017. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Formink. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now open the floor for questions. Before you ask your question, could you please just introduce yourself and indicate the media house that you represent? The first round of questions, please. Yes, ma'am. You are noted, ma'am.
I'm Virginia Kepler from the Citizen newspaper. Sorry, Virginia Kepler from the Citizen newspaper. Dr. Fulmang said there were 6 subjects in which there was no progress, if I have it correct there. And I know that 1 is maths. What went wrong and what is the other subjects?
Oh, okay, I'll We'll take the 5 questions and then we'll come back.
Okay. Yes, the next one, please.
Hi, my name is Giovanni Majani from ANN7 and I'm the reporter. Prof, I'd just like to find out, you've spoken about maths and how it hasn't improved. We also know that it's now 20% to pass for like grade 9. Don't you think that this will have an impact when they get to Matric? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Swazi from Pretoria News. I don't know if you'd mentioned it. My questions are for the department, for the public schools. What was the reason for the increase in progressed learners? And then also the reason for the adjustments of the subjects or the marks, upward or downward adjustments. I didn't understand the reasons behind that. And also, what is the overall feeling of how the metrics did this year for the public schools? Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Can I just indicate the lady over there, and then the gentleman. The lady and then the gentleman.
Okay, thank you. My name is Pelane Pakhadi from Eyewitness News. I heard something about, we understand that the Hawks are involved in the investigations in Limpopo and Guyana and so on. But the main reasons of which the question paper came about to be heard, as we've been told, is that the learners came forward and said that this question paper is very much familiar and we have seen it before. And we feel that this will be wrong for us to keep quiet. I stand to be corrected. But however, if you say you have not approved the release of their results, what are you saying to them? That what are you saying to other learners as well? Whistleblowers will have their results withheld?
Thank you.
Hi, Slee from Jacaranda FM News. Anyone can answer this question. I just want to know with regards to the exam leak. I mean, does Umalusi not think maybe there are some weaknesses, maybe technologically, should I say, with DBE being able to prevent such leakages happening? Because, I mean, with iPads, cell phones, I mean, really technology seems to be DBE's #1 enemy right now. So, did you identify that as a problem or not?
Those are 5 now.
Yes, we will keep it to 5 for now, 5 questions, and then I'll give over to the panel to answer the questions. Thank you.
So the first question was about which are the subjects for which there are no progress learners. I don't think there's anything sinister about that. It just happens to be the case that in the case of Isindebele, home language, Tshivenda, home language, English, second additional language, Setswana, second additional language, isiXhosa, second additional language, and Tsitsonga, first additional language. There were no progress learners. Nobody was promoted. So it just happens to be like that. There's no specific reason for it. There are subjects, though, that had high percentages of progress learners, but I think your question was which were the subjects and what impact. I think we did point out that even where there are many progress learners, in none of the subjects, the impact on the failure rate was more than 5%. The analysis shows us that it was never more than 5%. In fact, in some cases it was 0. In one case it's -1. So the second question was about the math and the 20%. Yeah, I think that, see, Umalusi is not the one to answer that question. Umalusi had nothing to do with that particular rule, but I can, in my personal capacity, I can tell you what I think of it, the way I understand it. And there may be people here that know more about this than I do. But from grade 7, 8, and 9, there were concerns that people get stuck in those grades because of the caps requirement that you have to get 50% in your home language and 40% in mathematics. And it was felt, according to the reasoning, that that's unfair for people who do not need mathematics. They could do math literacy. They don't need mathematics in grades 10, 11, and 12. So why require from them the 40% pass? So they can fail, but they can't fail. They can fail mathematics and go on. They can fail that one subject and yet condone, not in mathematics, but to go on to the next grade, but they must not get less than 20%. So it's not that the pass rate in maths has now been set at 20%. I think that is a wrong interpretation. I think the hysteria in the public said, oh, they just saw the 20% and the word maths, and they thought that that was the case. I hope that makes it clear. Yes.
You say that in terms of maths, it doesn't justify the whole process of maths, but then if they are required to get 20, obviously they won't be doing maths when they get to grade 10 up.
Yes.
But now we've also seen that maths literacy is no longer a soft subject. This will obviously be impacted by the 20 that they need, no?
I absolutely share your concern. But as I said, it's not a Umalusi rule. It's something that we have to deal with when it comes here. All that condemnation is saying you can progress into grade 10 without passing maths. But you can't fail it with less than 20%. That's what it says. Yeah. So now I give over to Dr. Akumetsi for the next couple of questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Volming. The question on the increase in the number of progress learners, maybe just to explain the principle first and the policy position of the department, is that learners are not allowed to repeat more than 4 times in a phase. If they have repeated 4 times in a phase, they are progressed to the next level. Hence, we have progress learners. Now, what this means is that this policy has always been there, but it has not been consistently applied by the department over the years. It was only in the last 2-3 years that they have started applying it consistently across the provinces, and also coming to clear policy positions, hence the increase that we see. Previously, as we would be announcing the results, we would not even account for the progress learners. We were quiet about them because it was not something that was closely managed. They have always been there. It's just that now there is consistency in the application of policy, and also that we are beginning to single them out. Now, once there is consistency in the application of policy, they are bound to increase, because now we are monitoring them from the foundation phase, intermediate phase, senior phase, and FET phase, to say who has done a phase for more than 4 years. I think that answers the question. Now, when it comes to the reasons for standardization, upward or downward adjustment, Professor Volming has gone to great lengths to explain this. I'll try to also summarize the things that we have been saying. When we give the learners the papers to write in our country, these papers have not been field tested. We are not able to determine how the learners, at the point of responding to the questions, how they are going to experience the paper. The papers are set by the examiners. They are internally moderated by the different assessment bodies, and then they are externally moderated by the external moderators of Umalusi. But these are human beings. They are experts, yes, but they are human beings. They may think that they have pitched a question at a particular level, only to find that they have either made it too difficult or too easy. Now, if you write your matric in a particular year, you don't have to be advantaged or disadvantaged because of the year in which we are born. Hence, the standardization process is necessary. What happens in the standardization exercise, as Professor Volming has said, we receive qualitative reports from the examiners and the moderators, who now tell us how the learners have experienced the paper as they were marking, to say we have made the following observations, and these are the trends that we are observing. And that is independent of looking at the statistics, at the tables, at the graphs. Now, once we go to the tables and the graphs, we take into account the inputs that we have received from the moderators and examiners. Those will be the qualitative inputs. And then we look at the tables to see how these learners fare in comparison to the average of the past 5 years. To say, in the past 5 years, we had so many failures in this subject, either they were high or low. We had so many distinctions. Now, what explains the increase in the distinctions? If we have an explanation of why we've got an increase, say there have been an increase in the number of subject advisors, there's been laboratory equipment bought in the number of schools, then that will account for the increase. But if there is no account, we'll then be able to say, no, but let's adjust to the norm that has been determined after, over the past 5 years. In the same breath, if a learner, a group of learners are now failing, the distinction rate has gone down, the pass percentage has gone down, the failure rate has gone down, has gone up. What we do is we consider the qualitative reports, and then we look at the raw marks of this particular year to say, where do the raw marks put the failure rate? And if we find that the paper was difficult, we then adjust the marks so that the learners of this year are not disadvantaged. That is in summary. As Professor Volming has said, he's got 10 years dealing with this. It is not easy to summarize the standardization process in 5 minutes. It's an elaborate process. It's quite involved. And also, Prof mentioned the whole notion of pairs analysis. To say, we look at a subject, say, like mathematics, and look at the subjects that compare with mathematics like accounting, like physical science, and say, this child has performed, this group of children have performed in this fashion in mathematics. How did they perform in accounting as a related subject and physical sciences? That will tell us if mathematics was either too hard or too easy. Those are the pairs analysis. Now, on the question of the leaked paper, yes, indeed, the Department of Basic Education received the report from the department as a result, from the Limpopo Education Department, as a result of a child who could not sit with his conscience, seeing that this paper had been seen before. Now, I want to be very careful here in clarifying this. The fact that you are a whistleblower does not mean that you are innocent immediately. It depends whether at the time when you saw the paper, you were aware that it's a leaked paper or not. That still has to be investigated. We are withholding the results because there are further investigations that are going to be done. Now the department, together with the Irregularities Committee, is going to advise the minister to say, well, these are innocent or these are not innocent. You can't be involved in a crime and then you are a whistleblower, then all of a sudden become innocent. We don't have all the facts on how this whistleblower was involved in this whole leakage of the paper and in receiving the paper for that matter. So we leave that to the department together with the members of the Irregularities Committee of the department. Yes, indeed, our systems are being compromised by technology. Every time technology develops, the systems are going to be compromised. Looking at the age groups of people sitting in the audience here, in our day when you wrote examinations, there were no cell phones. The invigilators did not have to contend with cell phones to say you leave your cell phones outside and so forth and so on. Now came the cell phones with all the WhatsApp messages, with all the internet and so forth and so on. Cell phones had to be left outside. Now the complications are going to go on and on and on, when the technology develops. It is up to the different assessment bodies, together with Umalusi, to up our game to say these are the new developments and we change our rules so that we deal with the new situation. You'd be surprised in 1980 if anybody said no one should bring a cell phone into the examination room. You'd be saying, what kind of animal is that? Now things are changing, and as they change, we're going to be changing our policies. Thank you very much.
Can I just add, just on the, there was a question about whether we have any comment on the overall impression. You know, I said earlier that none of us can actually, with any certitude, say that. We can guess, and we can guess. The problem is if you guess right. That's a problem. And then you could get into trouble. But you can use your judgments. What I did say is that last year there's a 5-year average, and there were wild deviations from that average. This year it was closer to the average, but you can't assume that what I'm saying is that it is above the average. It could also be below. So, but the performance this year was close to the average over the past 5 years. Then I think there's an honest question about the whistleblowers. It's an ethical dilemma, you know, and so maybe it's something that we need to talk about. It is the case. I recall one incident. Dr. Akumetsi and I, and Ms. Faith Ramutlan, we were asked to come through to 2 years ago, to KwaZulu-Natal, and there was a Matric student there that was caught, but he became a whistleblower. And he told us exactly how that system of group copying works and how the collusion works. And he also pointed out how he would have passed had it not been that he was caught. If the teacher didn't say, do this, forget what you know, he would have passed. And we brought that to the attention of the relevant authorities. And I think we made the right decision in the end. But in the case of Limpopo, no, I'm not sure. I've listened to the report of the ministerial task team. We've all listened to the report, and I'm not sure what you said is supported by that report. That's all I can say at this point.
Thank you, Professor Volmik. I will take another round of questions. There's a lady over there.
It's Virginia again, the Citizen. Professor Volmik, you talked about group copying in KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and Mpumalanga. I just wanted to find out, how did they copy? Did someone read the answers out to them? Or exactly how did it play down?
Thank you. I saw another hand.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to ask 2 questions. My name is Terence Ball from the South African National Lexicography Units. I represent the 9 official indigenous language lexicography units. We would like to know whether it's possible to get a breakdown of the progressed learners by their home language. And also, whether it's possible to request of the Western Cape and the Gauteng Department of Education, who annually kind of do a little dance around one another because they have achieved the best results, to indicate what the pass rate of their first additional language learners is. The reason I ask that is that obviously those 2 provinces have the highest number of learners privileged enough to write the examinations in their mother tongue. And I think it's important for us to understand the performance of first additional language learners, English first additional language learners in those provinces. Thank you.
Thank you. I had noted another hand in front. All right. Any other question? Thank you very much.
Okay. Maybe I have to start with the question about the pass rate. Umalusi is not able to tell what the pass percentage is going to be at the end of this year. We don't deal with overall combination of marks. We deal with the individual subjects. Now, it is very difficult to predict performance, overall performance when you are dealing with the individual subjects, because the subject combination has not happened, the condonation has not happened, and language compensation has not been factored in. So it will be very difficult. Like Prof is saying, it will be a wild guess, and a wild, dangerous guess for that matter. Now, coming to Virginia, a citizen, how were these learners helped? The investigations still have to happen. We discovered this through the patterns at the marking center. These learners were singled out. Their scripts showed a particular pattern of answering, as though they were dictated to or they were given answers in one form or the other. As to the form, we do not know until the investigations will reveal all the details. And the request of the pass rates for the first additional language learners, I think that could be directed to the relevant departments, Western Cape and Gauteng. We are not able to give that information here.
Yeah, so, but I do think it's a researchable question. So
Yeah.
I think it's something that we could, it helps us to think thoughts that we otherwise would not have thought. So that's what a researchable question is. But just coming back to Virginia's question, I think that there are various ways. There are ingenious ways in which these things work. Dr. Rakometsi has pointed out that we investigate these things. In the one case that some of us have personal knowledge, it worked. I won't mention the province or the person, but there is always collusion. So that's the one common thing in group copying, is that there's collusion. And it turns out that the collusion is between the learner and the teacher, largely, or at least the invigilator. So in this case, I will give you one example, but it doesn't cover all the cases. One example is this particular learner was writing, and the invigilator realized he was the only one writing. Nobody else in that class was writing, and alerted the subject teacher, who went out and wrote down answers, but didn't give the whole memo to one group. It broke it up into different groups, and you do these 3 questions, you do those 3 questions. So that's why the phenomenon of group copying comes in. So it is not something, it's not a leaked paper. It happens through that kind of collusion. There are many other examples as well. And no matter how strong your regulations are and your policies, if people are intent to be dishonest, they'll find a way to be dishonest. It's like anything else in life. If people don't want to obey the law, they won't obey the law. They'll find a way to come around it. So your question was about whether there are weaknesses. I think that was your question. And I think that it has to be the case, that we have to increase our levels of vigilance year on year. We can never become complacent about it, because there are always new ways. So you can't prevent it, but you can create deterrence. And in this particular case, in Limpopo, I know what is happening is that the Hawks are trying to find, they've already found one culprit, and they will find more. But in the meantime, there was a private investigation going on, who is not looking at the culprits, but looking at how that works, and how can we prevent it from working in the future. I think that's a great thing. So we will learn. I think it's an important question, but we will learn from the outcomes of that investigation. Yeah.
Whose results are being withheld? That 100 learners, no? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It's not the whole district or province or whatever.
Thank you. Anyone who wants to take the last bite? Are we all covered? Okay. That being the case, I will now hand over to Dr. Ruth Mampani, the chairperson of the Assessment Standards Committee of Umalusi Council, to do the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As we come to the end of our media briefing, it is a pleasure for me to extend our sincere gratitude to all of you for your presence at this 2016 examination media briefing. This day marks not only the end of an arduous journey, but an important milestone for Umalusi and the different assessment bodies as they finally deliver on their promises to their stakeholders, the learners and their parents. Let me thank in particular the following people. Firstly, I would like to thank all members of the Assessment Standard Committee for a job well done. I also extend a word of gratitude to the chairperson of the council, Prof. John Volmick, for providing visionary leadership to this end and for steering this process. Thank you, Prof. I also thank the CEO of Umalusi, Dr. Mafura Komesi, for his excellent leadership, as well as all the Umalusi senior managers and staff who worked tirelessly and against stringent timelines. A word of appreciation to the ladies and gentlemen of the media for their willingness to cover this approval of the release of the 2016 examination results. In conclusion, let me wish you all a pleasant and successful 2017 and a safe journey as you travel back to your respective destinations. Please join us for finger lunch after this. Thank you.
Thank you. The copies of the media statement will also be available now. Thank you.